Elliot Colburn to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I beg to move that this House has considered the treatment of Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan, and I'd like to thank the House for granting us the chance to debate this today, and I can see that it's a very heavily subscribed debate, so I'm going to try to be as fair as I can to colleagues and rustle through this so that everyone can have their say. But we are meeting at a very pertinent time, Mr. Sharma, because tomorrow marks 49 years since the Pakistani constitution was amended to declare that Ahmadis are not Muslims. And as I will set out later in my remarks, this is just one step in the ongoing discrimination and persecution of the Ahmadi population within Pakistan, a process that seems to have only picked up pace rather than decrease. And as the Minister will be aware, this issue is incredibly important to constituents of mine. The UK has always been a welcoming home for the Ahmadi community, many of whom have settled in my Carshalton and Wallington constituency due to its proximity to the Battle Footer Mosque in the Honourable Lady, the member for Mitcham and Morden's constituency, the chair of the APPG. Wimbledon, I apologise. Therefore, I'd like to thank all for attending today, and I look forward to hearing the SCDO's reply to today's debate. The Constitution, Mr. Sharma, the change in the Constitution, marked by tomorrow's anniversary, was followed 10 years later, in 1984, by an ordinance passed, the so-called anti-Ahmadi laws, which were enacted. And these ordinances made it a criminal offence for Ahmadis to call themselves Muslim or to practice Islam. Alarmingly, these changes to the law have not slowed, and nor have they abated. In fact, within the last decade, anti-Ahmadi changes to the law have only picked up pace. For example, in January 2015, a national action plan was introduced as a government tool to crack down on terrorism. But a number of human rights organisations have noted that the plan has also been misused to target religious communities simply for practising their faith, especially Ahmadiyya Muslims, and I'll gladly give way.
I congratulate the Honourable Member for having secured today's debate and for allowing me to intervene, because I have often spoken up about the human rights of minorities and feel that the freedom of religious belief is something that we should strongly protect across the globe. Does my honourable friend agree that standing by whilst people are being discriminated against because of their religion, ethnicity or background is simply not on? And is he too concerned, like me, about the potential spillover effect to the United Kingdom of Ahmadi Muslim persecution?
I absolutely agree with the Honourable Member. In fact, I will go later on in my speech to speak on just that subject, and I'm very grateful to him for raising that intervention. In 2017, just 2 years later after the National Action Plan, the Quran Publications Act was introduced, which prevented Ahmadis from publishing the Holy Quran. And what follows is a litany of blatant amendments to existing laws or the introduction of new ones that leave no question whatsoever as to their intention. And that is not only to discriminate against Ahmadis, but ultimately to persecute them in society, both symbolically and physically. And this was seen in the Islamabad High Court judgment just 5 years ago, calling for the nation's Ahmadis to be identifiable through names, adding Kidani or Mizra to the end of their names as well as their attire. It also called for them to be identified when applying for key roles within the civil service, education, armed forces, or the judiciary, all for the pure task of preventing anyone who is Ahmadi of holding such key posts within their country. And Mr. Sharma, these are just some of the many more recent legal changes that seek to affect every layer of Pakistan's political and civil society, further pushing out and ostracising Ahmadis, whether through the insistence of the Khatami Nabuwat, the finality of the prophethood clause, which is against Ahmadi belief or teachings, or even more stringent changes to blasphemy laws, including in the digital space. And these state-led anti-Ahmadi legal changes are having real impacts across Pakistan. The numbers speak for themselves, and I'd like to thank the many human rights and civil society organisations who have been in touch with us ahead of this debate for shining a light and maintaining these figures. I will gladly give way.
He's making a really excellent and moving speech, and I'm learning a lot about the situation in Pakistan, but he mentioned civil society groups. Would you agree with me that our diaspora groups need praising? It was a proud moment, Mr. Sharma, in your seat when the Ahmadiyya Mosque in Southall was opened in 2020, but it is disturbing. We shouldn't be complacent when we know in 2016 anti-Ahmadi leaflets were found in Stockwell, and in 2019, Channel 44 was fined £75,000 by Ofcom for Urdu language hate speech. So would you agree with me we should never be complacent and maybe look at putting these into sort of hate crime strategies, putting the Ahmadiyya community in there in this country too?
I absolutely agree with the Honourable Lady, and in extending her praise of civil society groups, I would like to break with convention and just thank those who are here in the public gallery today. To go over some of these figures, Mr. Sharma, since 1984, so that's less than 40 years, 277 Ahmadi Muslims have been murdered. Over 220 mosques have either been demolished, sealed, set on fire, or banned from being constructed. 80 burials have been denied in common cemeteries, and more than 430 graves have been desecrated. And this shows the very reality of what is essentially state-sanctioned, supported and encouraged discrimination and persecution of Ahmadis. And this has led to emboldened harassment, attacking and even the murder of Ahmadis, as well as the denial of their rights, rights that many of us take for granted. As I've already noted, many have sadly and tragically been murdered simply because of their faith since 1984, with the deadliest attack on the community happening in May 2010, when the Taliban attacked worshippers during Friday prayers at 2 Ahmadi mosques in Lahore, killing 86 people. One of the latest incidents being the murder of 75-year-old Dr. Rashid Ahmed in February 23 in Gujarat, part of what a number of international agencies have identified as the ongoing, concentrated targeting of Ahmadis. There is also the attack on the right to worship. And within this house and within our nation, there are many people of many different faiths, and many indeed with no faith. And they are free to choose where, how, and what to believe. Yet 18 Ahmadiyya mosques have had minarets demolished since 2023 alone. Mosques across Pakistan have been sealed and minarets have been demolished by police, despite there being no legal justification for such an attack. And alongside this, the right to practice their faith is under increasing attack, leaving them isolated and in fear of their lives. And the state's insistence in shutting down any public demonstration of Ahmadiyya faith is seen through Ahmadis being prohibited from building new mosques, meeting, or holding other religious gatherings such as for Eid. I would gladly give way.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way and congratulating him on securing this important debate. The point he raises about the persecution of Ahmadis is an absolutely appalling state, not just on the government of Pakistan, but also has real effects here in the UK. I've been contacted by members of the community across Rosendale and Darwin and East Lancashire more generally, including Mohammed Shafiq, the head of external affairs for the Baitur Rashid Mosque in Blackburn. And the issue he raises about this ongoing prevention of freedom of worship is persecution of an appalling nature, not happening in Pakistan, but I've been told by members of the community that similar ideas are being imported here in the UK. So while it's very good to have from the Treasury bench, the FCO responding to this debate, this is also very much an issue for Great Britain and our fantastic Ahmadi community here in the United Kingdom.
Elliot Colbert.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend for that intervention, and he's absolutely right. It does have real implications here in the UK by allowing the importation of that hatred and that rhetoric onto our shores, and I will go on to that in a bit more detail later. But as well as the ban, Mr. Sharma, on the publication of religious texts, cyber laws have also massively impacted the Ahmadis' ability to learn and practice their faith, with social media sites and websites in Pakistan being banned and shut down, but also the targeting of websites in the UK, USA and Canada by the Pakistani state in an attempt to enact Pakistan's cyber laws. However, it's not just in life, Mr. Sharma, that Ahmadis are targeted. Since 2021, within the last 2 years, more than 420 graves have been desecrated and attacked, destroyed and defaced just because they bear Quranic inscriptions. And even the grave of Pakistan's only Nobel laureate, Professor Abdus Salam, has been desecrated to remove the word Muslim from the epitaph. And such is the state's tacit, or at least implied, approval. In turning to what the British government has done, I want to thank the FCDO for their engagement with the APPG when we reach out, and I'm sure the chair will want to go into more detail on that. and the Minister's willingness to meet and listen to concerns, and indeed for reaffirming in a recent written question the UK's government's commitment to freedom of religion and belief, and that the ministers will continue to raise this at the highest level. And it is indeed vital that the British government continues this work through all possible channels with its Pakistani counterparts, as well as working with international partners both at national and NGO level to press for not just the relaxation of anti-Ahmadi rhetoric and legislation, but its full removal from penal codes and blasphemy laws. And only then can we hope to stave off the wave of anti-Ahmadi hatred. I will gladly give way.
Member for giving way, but isn't it fundamental to the United Nations Charter, the right to the free exercise of religion? And should we not therefore be holding countries to account in order to protect, firstly, against action by the state, but also the condoning and in fact the lack of enforcement by the state, which is so often, which after all is the basis of refugee conventions, as well as the failure of the state to protect, as well as action by the state. Shouldn't we be holding countries to account for that, rather than their governments basically failing to satisfy the needs of their people and looking for scapegoats, as has happened so often in history?
Elliot Colburn.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Member for that intervention, and I absolutely agree with him, and I look forward to hearing some more about that later on the course of today's debate. I think he makes that point very well indeed. In the interim, Mr. Sharma, however, it is clear that there are still huge issues for ordinary Ahmadi Muslims. So I would like to ask the Minister what the government is doing and what the SCDO is doing in partnership with the Home Office, as has been well mentioned, to better protect and assist Ahmadis who are fleeing persecution and violence. And indeed, as I've already noted, Carshalton and Wallington is home to many Ahmadi Muslims, as indeed is the London Borough of Merton next door. And in summing up, I would just like to underline why I believe that the government is not just right to pursue recourse for the Ahmadi community, but to go much further. And that is because the Pakistani government and the widespread anti-Ahmadi violence is giving oxygen to those in other countries far beyond its own borders. And the authorities' fervent discrimination is only encouraging anti-Ahmadi sentiment elsewhere, and indeed, as has already been said in many interventions here in the United Kingdom. We have already seen in 2023 alone anti-Ahmadi extremism take root in other countries, where in January, Burkina Faso saw 9 Ahmadi Muslims brutally killed, one by one, after being taken from a mosque near Dori and asked to renounce their faith, and shot dead when they refused. In March in Bangladesh, an anti-Ahmadi extremist mob attacked the Ahmadi Muslim Annual Convention, and the fanatics torched the homes of Ahmadi Muslims in Ahmadnagar, and one Ahmadi, Zahid Hassan, was killed during the attack, and over 70 were injured. In Algeria, too, Ahmadis are facing ongoing discrimination, being denied the right to practice their faith and being targeted by the authorities. And there is at least one Ahmadi prisoner of conscience serving a 3-year prison sentence for practicing his Ahmadi beliefs. But alarmingly, it has also reached the United Kingdom as well. And one incredibly shocking incident took place in Glasgow in March 2016, when shopkeeper Asad Shah was sadly murdered and stabbed to death simply because of his faith. And the murderer was told to be inspired by Mumtaz Qadri of Pakistan, the bodyguard who murdered Punjab Governor Salam Taseer, who supported a review of blasphemy laws in Pakistan. And as one Ahmadi human rights group notes, this is an incredibly worrisome reminder of the effect of anti-Ahmadi feelings being left unchecked across borders.
Would my honourable friend give way?
I will gladly give way.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for giving way and for securing this important debate. I'm very proud to represent a vibrant Ahmadiyya community group in Huddersfield. And in fact, many of my constituents would be shocked to hear of this persecution and discrimination that they face, not only here in the UK, but around the world, because they see them locally being involved in so many positive community projects. Love for all, hatred for none. Can I just say I fully support his request for the Foreign Office, the Home Office, to continue to raise this unacceptable persecution, and that we can all continue to work cross-party to support our vibrant Ahmadiyya community.
Elliot Colburn.
I want to absolutely concur with my honourable friends. I had the pleasure of attending attending the UK's annual convention, Jalsa Salana, over the summer recess, and I know many colleagues here have attended that before, and I know have always found the Ahmadiyya community to be incredibly welcoming, and it's a fantastic event, so it speaks well of him to raise that. In just summing up, Mr. Sharma, as I'm conscious of time and I want to allow colleagues to speak, I do believe that the FCDO needs to continue and up its ante when it comes to the ongoing dialogue with the Pakistani government and encourage them to fully remove all anti-Ahmadi laws from their constitution and their penal code. Because any continuance of state-sanctioned persecution, official or otherwise, will only continue to stir anti-Ahmadi hatred and extremism, something which unfortunately we have seen take root in Pakistan but also elsewhere. And it is not too late to strike at those roots. International pressure to do this is paramount, and I do hope that the FCDO will continue to play a central role in applying said pressure, working with other nations for the many Ahmadis that I am proud to call constituents and for the many that we are proud to have here in the United Kingdom, but also for the countless still in Pakistan who live under constant fear of persecution.
I remind members that they should vote if they wish to be called in the debate. The question is that this House has considered the treatment of Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan. I intend to call front bench if there's no votes called 5:10. I can see 2, 2, 4, 5, 6 members. 2, 4, 6, 7 members. I can see. Sorry, Fiona. We got about 22 minutes. Amongst 7, 3 minutes will be okay. And I fix the time 3 minutes each. And should I call, who was the first? Siobhan McDonough.
Thank you, Chair. Can I congratulate the member for Carshalton Wallington on securing this debate and you for chairing it, Mr. Sharma. I would not wish to take too long because there are so many people who want to contribute, and that is a great strength in this debate because we can absolutely be assured that governments, both regional and national in Pakistan, will know of this debate, will be watching it, and it will have an impact. So it is great that there are so many people who are here today who've taken the time and who are from nearly all the parties represented in our Parliament. I have the privilege of being chair of the all-party parliamentary group from Ahmadi Muslims, and can I say it's one of the easier tasks as an APPG officer, because always, due to the incredible lobbying of the community, we are always caught with very little effort, because we know about the harassment and discrimination that Ahmadis experience in Pakistan and how that percolates to other countries, including, regrettably, our own. The APPG, Mr. Sharma, undertook an in-depth investigation into discrimination in Pakistan, and the single most depressing fact that I took from all those evidence sessions was that Ahmadis are discriminated more strongly by younger people than older people. So liberalism is in reverse in Pakistan, and the discrimination that the community feel is likely to be of a very long-standing nature. And that is in part because the Pakistan government has withdrawn from the responsibility to educate its young people and given that responsibility to people who hold very extreme views about religion. And Britain, as one of the largest contributors towards international aid in Pakistan, has a role to consider how that investment is used. And it took me a very long time to get to the bottom of the fact that FCDO money was being used to produce books in schools that were in turn discriminating against Ahmadis. So I would like to ask the Minister if he could address the nature of investment in international development in Pakistan, and how we can ensure that it does nothing that encourages the discrimination that exists from birth to death. And the Right Honourable Member before me has explained how that affects all levels of civil life and the community. And at that, Mr. Chair, I would like to sit down.
Thank you. Fiona Bruce.
Thank you, Chair. I want to focus today on two matters of justice. Firstly, restrictions on Ahmadi Muslim lawyers in Pakistan to practice, and secondly, the detention of Ahmadi religious prisoners of conscience. Recent announcements in parts of Pakistan that the Ahmadi Muslim lawyers must effectively renounce their religion in order to practice their profession are completely unacceptable. That both the district bar associations of Gujranwala and the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa Bar Council have issued notices that anyone applying for admittance to their bars must positively assert they are Muslim and denounce the teachings of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and its founder is a profound breach of those lawyers' freedom of religion or belief and contrary to international legal standards. And this not only infringes the freedom of religion or belief of those lawyers, but also any individual seeking access to justice through representation from one of those lawyers. And indeed, I understand that Ahmadi Muslims are already finding it more difficult to secure legal representation due to threats against advocates offering to defend Ahmadi Muslims being commonplace. We're even hearing accounts of physical attacks against lawyers, and even in the courtroom itself. One such account was on 27th April this year, when a 77-year-old advocate, Syed Al-Ahmad Tariq, was assaulted by other lawyers whilst actually practising in court. Now, Nick Vilan-KC, Chair of the Bar Council of England and Wales, has urged the Bar Council of Pakistan to take action, specifically with regard to these decisions by those district bar councils. As he states, such actions are intentionally discriminatory and seem impossible to reconcile with Pakistan's constitutional principles of religious freedom and equality before the law. And of course, Pakistan adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, which of course includes Article 18 on freedom of religion or belief, and has also adopted and ratified the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. So the clear targeting of Ahmadiyya lawyers may well also prevent aspiring advocates from entering their chosen profession or force them to choose between their religion or profession. And so I ask the government minister here listening to the debate to press the government in Pakistan and their appropriate senior law officers to take similar action as that urged by Nick Vilan-KC, and urge the Bar Council of Pakistan to ensure steps are taken to retract these regulations and ensure that prevention is taken to prevent threats, intimidation and physical attacks against lawyers. And I regret that time does not enable me to turn to my second concern, which is the detention of Ahmadi and Muslim religious prisoners of conscience.
John McNaught.
Thank you.
This debate, and it's a sad and a very grave element of déjà vu. I brought along my file, and I just, way back in 2014, some of the members that were here then can remember, we were debating then the UN rapporteur on freedom of religion and belief. And let me just quote him very quickly about what he said at the time. He said, "I'm very concerned by the recent surge of violent attacks against Ahmadiyya Muslims by militant extremists. Such violence is fueled by the existing blasphemy laws, as he set out. And he urged Pakistan to guarantee the right to freedom of religion and belief." And then went on and said, actually, they should put in place protective measures to ensure personal security. But also he said that those that are perpetrating these crimes should be brought to justice. That was the report we debated 10 years ago, 2014. And since then, we've had a litany of year after year we've been in these debates. Soon after that, the report came out. There was a torching of a mosque. There were attacks and individual murders that took place. And it just went on. Year after year, we've reported. In 2020, as the Honourable for Mitchell and Mortimer said, we produced the report, Suffocation of Faithful, the Persecution of Ahmadis. Now, at that point, we raised the issue of education, and the then Foreign Secretary, then certainly.
I just make a very powerful point. My very short point back to you is that we must not stop using everything in this House to continue to raise this issue. For if we stop doing it, the Pakistan government won't listen, and there is no chance, at least if we continue raising the issues of persecution, there is a chance it can be alleviated.
That's exactly the point we've made consistently. And every time there's an outrage, bringing it to the floor of this House is important because it is noted back in Pakistan. But it's just coming to the view, really, that this has been a consistent pattern now, and the Pakistani governments, successive governments, have refused to budge. And it's been a continuous censorship, the denial of voting rights, the ban on publication of religious texts, imprisonment for blasphemy, 3 years for just calling yourself a Muslim and as an Ahmadi, and then obviously the implications of what's happening in education. And the numbers that have been on death row over those years as well as a result of the laws that have been put in place. So it does come back to what pressure we can apply. The demands that we've had consistently over this period is, first of all, we urge the Pakistan government to prosecute those instigating hate, and that they offer urgent protection to Ahmadi Muslims, investigate the trend of unprovoked violence, repeal this blasphemy legislation, and just generally uphold its rights. We do have a specific role as a government. The UK does play a specific role in relation to Pakistan, and we need to examine now all points of pressure that we can exert, because I don't want to be here in another 10 years and we're debating the same issues once again.
David.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Can I welcome this debate, and the fact there are so many colleagues from all sides who've come shows both the extent of the persecution that the Ahmadi community suffer in Pakistan, but also, I think, the amazing contribution the British Ahmadi community makes in our country, both in terms of their charitable works, the works they play day in, day out in our society, and their message of peace, which His Holiness is one of the greatest speakers on. I've worked with colleagues on the APPG. We've heard the evidence that the colleagues have set forth today. And like the Honourable Member who's just spoken, there is a sense of déjà vu here. And actually worse than that, to my mind, it's the situation in Pakistan for the Ahmadiyya community is getting worse. Particularly when we see the political chaos in Pakistan with the vacuum there. The extremists are exploiting that vacuum, and we're seeing yet more mosques desecrated. We're seeing more assaults, more murders, and therefore I think the British government has to up its game, up its voice, working with other countries across the world to make sure the Pakistani government, the authorities, are in no doubt about this. There may be this vacuum in Pakistani politics at the moment, but it is the army, it is the police force, it is the authorities who are propagating this persecution and abuse, and they need to hear our voice loud and clear. I am genuinely worried, Mr. Sharma, about where this is going if we don't see some change after all these years. Those of us who've worked with the Holocaust Education Trust and been trips to Auschwitz and seen the 8 steps to genocide, really worry that with the fact that this is in the constitution of the country and is getting worse, that there is a path here which is extremely worrying. And I know that sounds, some maybe sound alarmist, and I don't use that analogy in any light way. But I just feel that people have got to get our voice heard more clearly than it has been. So I would urge the Minister, in responding to this debate, to make clear what actions the government are taking. What are they considering? Are they considering removing trade preferences? And one thing we can do is reach out to those Ahmadi refugees around the world, in Sri Lanka, in Thailand, in Malaysia, and actually work with the UNHCR to make sure they can come to this country and settle with families that they have here. I have constituents who's an Afghan Ahmadi his family's been moved to Pakistan. They would like to resettle. They're acknowledged by the UNHCR, but the Home Office isn't listening. So I would urge the Minister in responding both to say what actions they're taking against the government of Pakistan and what actions are we doing to help Ahmadi Muslims around the world.
Philip Anderson.
Honoured to serve under your chairship and to be called in this important debate, and I congratulate the member for Carshalton and Wallington for securing this debate, especially in the time of the upcoming elections in Pakistan, when discrimination against the Ahmadis is increasing because of that. This The timing of this debate couldn't be better. Pakistan is a wonderful, beautiful country with whom we have a strong relationship in the UK. When I visited earlier this year on a delegation with the all-party parliamentary group for freedom of religion and belief, we were warmly welcomed by ministers, the Speaker of the Assembly, organisations and many, many residents. We want the best for Pakistan and feel that this discrimination of one particular community is holding back the country, and that's why we care so much. Also, the Ahmadiyya Muslims are a very important part of my community, Chair. There are many thousands in Putney, Southfields and Roehampton. We have many celebrations together, and I see them living out their motto, love for all, hatred for none, on a daily basis. Before I went to Pakistan, I heard from many constituents about the persecution they felt. But when I saw it for myself, it was shocking. I saw persecution and discrimination faced every single day in schools, at work, on the street, in law courts, in shops, and even in cemeteries. Since the Lahore massacre of 94 people in 2010, most women and children that I met have not attended the mosque for that fear of violence. But the 1973 Pakistan Constitution enshrines freedom of religion and belief and says that every citizen shall have the right to profess, practice, and propagate his religion. The test of that constitution is when it gets difficult and there are differing beliefs, there are different theological differences. That's when it matters even more that human rights are protected. But Ahmadis can't turn to the democratic system to defend their rights because they're not allowed to vote or stand for Parliament, and they can't turn to the justice system either. 50 Ahmadi Muslims are currently in prison solely on account of their faith. And Eid festival celebrations, for example, this year led to massive police raids to the homes of Ahmadi people who were just practicing their faith, with 12 Ahmadis arrested for visiting family and friends to take part in the celebrations. And so I urge the government to press the government of Pakistan to allow all Ahmadiyas to vote in the upcoming elections, to release all Ahmadi Muslim prisoners of conscience, to revoke the anti-Ahmadi measures and laws taken by bar councils and bar associations in Pakistan to target Ahmadi Muslim lawyers, to provide protection to all citizens of Pakistan against religious-based violence, and to repeal the draconian anti-Ahmadi laws and blasphemy laws that are being used to deny freedom of religion and legitimise violence against religious communities in Pakistan. And finally, to sanction anti-Ahmadi preachers from visiting and reject any visas for them applying to visit the UK. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharma. I want to pay tribute, first of all, to the Ahmadiyya community in my Glasgow Central constituency. They have always been incredibly welcoming to me and to my colleagues and to the broader neighbours and friends in York Hill, where their mosque is located. And I want to particularly thank Ahmed Awusu Kanadu for the work that he does in the local community. They have regular fundraising events for many charities, including the Glasgow Children's Hospital charity, which I know is greatly appreciated. But the more that I have got to know this community over the years, the more that I've heard about the pressure and the danger and the threats that the Ahmadi community has been under. Honourable members have already pointed out about the persecution of Ahmadi Muslims and that this has been going on now for decades. Those practising their faith, sadly, particularly but not exclusively, in Pakistan have been persecuted, discriminated against in life and in death, in mosques and at their graves, in businesses and in observances of Eid. And they have faced attacks simply for wanting to have their faith. And what makes all of this the worse is that this is endorsed by the Pakistani constitution. And this has disturbing consequences to us here in the UK. In 2016, Assad Shah was murdered in the neighbouring constituency to mine. His killer...
Well, session suspended for 15 minutes. So we come back on 17:19. Thielers.
Thank you very much. As I was saying, this very disturbing aspect of the Pakistan Constitution has consequences here in the real world. And in 2016, Assad Shah was murdered in the neighbouring constituency to mine, his killer inspired by hate speech. And I would like to ask the Minister specifically for what safeguards are put in place for visas for people coming to the UK. because I understand from much of the briefing that the Ahmadiyya community has provided that there have been a number of such hate preachers who have come to the UK on visas, preached their hate, which has a consequence to our communities. And I would like to know what safeguards are in place to ensure that that does not happen and is not allowed to happen, because people, wherever they are, have the right to practice their faith as they wish to do so, in safety and in security and without persecution.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I say what a pleasure it is to speak in this debate? And first of all, declare an interest as chair of the All-Parliamentary Group for International Freedom of Religion and Belief. I want to thank the honourable gentleman, as he always does, brings excellent issues for us all to support, and he does it well. Pakistan holds a very, very dear and special place in my heart. And as an MP, I've had the privilege of visiting the country a number of times. The latest being in February this year with the Honourable Lady who spoke previously. And forgive me for not being able just to say exactly our three parts of our constituency, but she and I had a good presentation. We were well received, and we learnt a lot. There's been a surge in the level of persecution faced by Ahmadiyya's Muslims, alongside a spike in blasphemy allegations, which disproportionately impacts upon these communities. Since February, the situation has deteriorated. Only this week, on Monday, masked men used sledgehammers to damage the minarets in the rooftop of an Ahmadi mosque in Karachi. Reports indicated a mob attacked the mosque at the time of Zuhr prayer. As well as destroying the minarets, the mob started chanting slogans against the Ahmadiyya community and attacking worshippers. It was the second attack this year on that building. The persecution of Pakistan's Ahmadi Muslim community has been sustained and systemic. The situation of Ahmadis in Pakistan is also unique, as the group is excluded from the protections other religious minorities have. They're not allowed to vote. Can you imagine, Mr. Chairman, if you weren't allowed to vote, or I wasn't allowed to vote, how we would feel? That's how the Ahmadis feel. They're not allowed to vote. Even the National Commission for Minorities in Pakistan excludes Ahmadis whenever they are supposed to be all-embracing. Blasphemy cases lodged against them have increased tenfold in the last year. The persecution by the TLP party has been significant, and some of the chants and the statements coming from TLP supporters stating to carry out attacks against pregnant Ahmadi Muslim mothers to ensure that no new Ahmadis are born. These things are totally unacceptable. There's desecration of graveyards, they forcing mosques to close, committing acts of violence, graffiti and desecration in graveyards as well. We've heard multiple credible reports from members of the police or the armed forces standing by and allowing acts of violence to occur with impunity. Ahmadiyyas have been accused of blasphemy as well. I finish with this in the last 30 seconds. This is almost many more words than anybody else. As a country, the UK has learned through a long history that when religious minorities have been denied rights, it harms the rest of society. When they are granted equal rights, the UK has thrived. So my beseeching to the Minister, and ultimately in the discussions that he and our British government will have with the Pakistan government, is to ensure, and I urge the government of Pakistan to enact this principle of freedom of religious belief for all. We have it, they should have it. Thanks very much.
Front bench, 5 minutes. Martin Day.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. I'm very grateful to the member for Carshalton and Wallington for securing today's debate. There should be no doubt that the principle of freedom of religion is a fundamental one which must be upheld for all. Yet too many people face persecution throughout the world for their views, and it's particularly disappointing to hear that such intolerant attitudes may be spreading to these islands. As we've heard, the Ahmadis view themselves as within Islam and proclaim their Muslim identity, but other Islamic schools of thought view Ahmadi theology as outside of Islam. We've heard that the 1974 Pakistan Constitution formally denounced the Ahmadis as not part of the Muslim faith. And in 1984 and 1986, the Pakistan Penal Code was amended and stipulated up to 3 years in prison if Ahmadis posed as Muslims by worshipping in non-Ahmadi mosques, performing the Muslim call to prayer, using the traditional Islamic greeting in public, and disseminating religious materials or propagating their faith. The Penal Code contains a blasphemy law which includes the death penalty with no evidence required for Ahmadis. The Ahmadi commonly are victims of targeted killings, hate speech, the destruction of their homes, mosques and tombs, and have no recourse to the justice procedures as they are not considered equal citizens. Perhaps most worryingly, the violent treatment of Ahmadis is becoming more normalised in Pakistan, sadly, often with the assistance of the authorities. From January to July 2023, over 170 graves were destroyed and at least 2 houses of worship. In July 2023, 53 Ahmadi graves were desecrated, and I will pronounce this wrongly, I am sure, Gujranwala district under the supervision of the police, while security forces arrested several Ahmadis for conducting Islamic ritual slaughter in celebration of the Eid al-Adha holiday and thereby posing as Muslims. In 2022, the Commons International Development Committee, in its report on UK aid to Pakistan, said that the country's blasphemy laws are frequently misused to settle personal disputes and to target religious minorities. And in 2020, there was an increase in blasphemy charges, with at least 199 people being charged. Those accused were often subject to mob justice and even extrajudicial killings. Omar Warach, head of the South Asia at Amnesty International, has said there are few communities in Pakistan who have suffered as much as the Ahmadis. And a direct quote from him says, "The recent wave of killings tragically underscores not just the seriousness of the threats they face, but also the callous indifference of the authorities who have failed to protect the community or punish the perpetrators." So how do we turn today's consensual debate and desire to see a positive outcome into action which benefits the Ahmadi Muslims whom we have been discussing? Well, the UK is Pakistan's largest European trading, investment and development partner and is one of Pakistan's leading development assistance partners. So I would urge the UK government to use this partnership to encourage Pakistan to abide by its international obligations. The first step in ending violence for the Ahmadis should be the revocation of the blasphemy law. Clearly, as this situation is fraught with historical tension and identity rooted in religion, any action and calls must be an exercise in strategic advocacy and diplomacy. The UK has one of the largest Pakistani diasporas in Europe, estimated at over 1.6 million, and Pakistan relies heavily on the UK in the context of international development and trade. So I urge the UK government to exhaust all diplomatic channels in order to convey the need for protection of religious minorities and to take a stance against the normalisation of religious persecution. It would not be possible to discuss this vulnerable international minority without some mention of the UK position in cutting international aid spending. In Pakistan, UK bilateral official development assistance spending reduced from 463 million in 2016 to 133 million in 2023-24. The UK government maintains that its aid spending in Pakistan is geared towards supporting the most vulnerable in the country, including religious minorities such as the Ahmadi. Yet this dramatic decrease puts the future development of marginalised groups at risk. It is specifically damaging to the Ahmadi, who have no institutional support within Pakistan, face discrimination from within the Pakistan constitution. In conclusion, I am calling for the UK government to be a critical friend, and as any government which does not use its influence to stand up to their friends when their friends are using their domestic laws to systematically oppress members of their own society is a government with questionable priorities. The UK government must continue to work with Pakistan and international partners and to use the principles of peace and democracy under the Commonwealth to safeguard the Ahmadis in Pakistan.
Thank you. Catherine West.
Thank you very much, Mr Sharma. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship and also to hear the opening speech from the member for Carshalton and Wallington, and also to hear the work of the All-Party Group, which is chaired by the member for Mitcham and Morden, which does such an excellent job to highlight the discrimination against the Ahmadi community. And we know that freedom of religion or belief, as was so carefully laid out by the member for Congleton, who is known in this place for raising those issues, and we in this Parliament hold dear those concepts of peace and democracy. In every country and every community, we firmly believe that people should be able to live their lives as they wish and pray and worship in whichever way they feel most appropriate. But sadly, in many parts of the world, religion and belief can lead to persecution, and Pakistan is sadly among those places. It has been the case that we've repeatedly raised concerns about blasphemy laws and the worrying situation for minorities in Pakistan when having debates on freedom of religion. It's right that we're able to use this opportunity today to shine a spotlight on the particular treatment of Ahmadi Muslims, which is so often overlooked. In fact, even the true figure for the population grouping of Ahmadis is not really known. The House of Commons Library was unable to confirm it could be up to 4.5 million people, but because many people are not included in the census, it's difficult to know the exact number of the community. We heard from the member for Putney about the legal changes and subsequent application of Pakistan's penal code prohibiting Ahmadi Muslims from declaring their faith publicly, propagating their faith, printing or obtaining material related to their faith, building mosques or calling their places of worship mosques, and making the call for Muslim prayers. Virtually any public act of worship, devotion or propagation by an Ahmadi can be treated as blasphemy, a criminal offence punishable by fine, imprisonment or death. And this is a draconian, repressive approach to a minority group who until so relatively recently was seen to be legally as Muslims. According to the US Commission on International Religious Freedom, desecrations on Ahmadi gravestones, an appalling act of disrespect, is a regular occurrence. And this was described by the MP for Hayes and Harlington, who of course goes way back to 2014 and before that in raising these issues here in this House. According to the community's own records, in 2020 alone, 164 Ahmadi gravestones were desecrated by anti-Ahmadi actors. And it's clear that the community is persecuted and is of little surprise that the global Ahmadi community, some of whom we have with us in the gallery today, have moved their headquarters to the safety of London. However, we must be aware, and many members have raised this, and the Minister will, I'm sure, mention this in his concluding remarks, that we need to be aware of the cyber element to this, because I'm sure that there are people who feel under attack, being a minority here in the UK, and we must all be aware of that, and the government needs to be active on it. We heard the member for Ealing Central and Acton mention that particular issue around the civil society groups in the UK, who do educate others on the importance of the community, but who do worry about the ongoing persecution in Pakistan and beyond. I know the Minister will wish to respond to the points made by the honourable member who called this debate and the specific concerns raised by the community in his constituency. So I wanted to keep my questions brief for the Ministers. The member for Worley said earlier in this debate that it's right that our government should hold Pakistan to account because we have a lot to do with Pakistan in so many areas, whether it's our diaspora, whether it's our strong relationships with that country. And we are in a very good position when we talk about things like climate change, when we talk about things like poverty, women's rights and so on, with colleagues in Pakistan. Could he outline to us, is he absolutely sure that no UK aid money is being used, perhaps unwittingly, to aid in any persecution or abet any persecution for the Ahmadi community? And secondly, could he say what the FCDO is doing to undertake to protect and promote tolerance, diversity, religious freedoms in Pakistan, specifically where we have that link in with UK aid? I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Mr. Sharma.
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Sharma. It's a great pleasure to be here. And I'm very grateful to my honourable friend, the member for Carshalton and Wallington, for securing this important debate, and I commend his work and his ongoing support for freedom of religion or belief. And I would also like to pay tribute to his work as Vice Chair of the APPG for Ahmadiyya, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, which continues vital work to raise awareness of the issues that we've been discussing today. And I know that my honourable friend recently addressed the important annual conference in Hampshire earlier this summer, which was a very important event. And of course, colleagues will know that the Naval Lord Ahmed, Minister of State for the Middle East, North Africa and South Asia, and the UN is responsible for this portfolio. But of course, being in the other place, can't speak in this chamber. It's therefore my great pleasure to respond on his behalf. And I met in advance of this debate with him, particularly to talk about this topic. And of course, members will acknowledge his personal deep insight into these issues. I'm very grateful for the contributions of honourable members today, and we recognise the strength of feeling, and I'll try to respond to the points raised. Though this debate centres on the... Very briefly.
There was an allegation, or certainly a strong implication, that UK international aid might be going towards textbooks that contain lies or hates. Can he assure this House that our aid doesn't go directly or indirectly through governments, NGOs or charities to textbooks or educational aids that contain lies or hate, and won't do so in the future either.
Well, I'm grateful for that question again, and I was going to respond to that, and I was grateful for the same question being posed by the Honourable Lady for Mitcham and Morden. Of course, we continue to engage on the critical need for freedom of religion or belief in schools, and the UK has supported initiatives to review the national curriculum of Pakistan, providing technical assistance to Pakistan to create a more inclusive curriculum and textbooks. So it's something we're very much aware of. At Pakistan's Universal Periodic Review in January, the UK formally recommended that Pakistan ensure school textbooks are inclusive of all religions and ensure religious minorities can access suitable alternatives to compulsory Quranic studies. And that was, of course, at the UN Periodic Review of Human Rights. So we do keep it continually in our sights, and I can't confirm 100% today that it's not an ongoing problem, but it is something that our mission and our other diplomats are energetically focused on. Now, of course, although this debate centres today on the persecution of Ahmadiyya community, I think it would be useful just to reaffirm this government's commitment to defending the rights and freedoms of all of those persecuted for their religious beliefs in Pakistan and indeed across the world. The Ahmadiyya Muslim community's roots run deep in Pakistan, as has been mentioned in this debate from Abdus Salam, Pakistan's first Nobel laureate, to its distinguished first foreign minister, Sir Mohammad Zarafullah. Ahmadi Muslims have made a tremendously invaluable contribution to modern Pakistan, and it's poignant that such a community so entwined with the founding of that country now face such devastating persecution. As has been described today by colleagues, the situation is dire. We recognise that. Discrimination against Ahmadi Muslims and other religious groups starts with Pakistan's constitution, which declares Ahmadis non-Muslims. The misuse of Pakistan's blasphemy laws to target marginalised communities is all too common. Preventative legislation is weak, and poor implementation of existing laws does allow hate speech and violence to spread with impunity. And, of course, over the last few weeks alone, we've seen the appalling instance of mob violence in Pakistan and the desecration of Ahmadi as well as Christian and Hindu places of worship. And we stand in solidarity with the victims. And I know all our thoughts go out to those affected. And colleagues may have noticed that today Lord Ahmed tweeted in condemnation of the recent appalling attack on the Ahmadiyya Hall in Karachi in Sindh province. Now, in terms of UK action, defending religious freedom is at the heart of all of our work in Pakistan. Our approach to protecting freedom of religion or belief of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and all persecuted groups has three pillars. Firstly, we use our close relationship with Pakistan to influence and advocate. Second, we support communities through our programme and development work. And thirdly, we use our global influence to spur the wider international community into action. Please.
We need the whole debate in the past and now is about how we can exert pressure.
Yes.
Can I just put on the table the potential consideration of the use of Magnitsky sanctions against individuals that are involved in the persecution of Ahmadis within Pakistan? Many of them have links with this country, including financial links. Therefore, the Magnitsky clause sanctions might prove effective.
Well, I'm very grateful for that intervention. And he will know that the UK has a very long-standing relationship with Pakistan, underpinned, as has been described today, by our deep shared history and cultural links. And we build on this relationship to advocate for the most vulnerable in Pakistani society, calling out repression in public and in private at the highest levels. So in January, the Minister of Development and Africa underlined the need for Pakistan to ensure the safety and religious freedom of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community when he met with the then Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif. The Minister for South Asia, the Lord Ahmed, spoke with Pakistan's former Minister for Human Rights, Mian Raz Pirzada, in June to raise the persecution of religious communities, including Pakistan's deeply troubling blasphemy laws. And he also emphasised the importance of promoting respect for all religions during his meeting with the then Foreign Minister, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, in December. It is crucial, Mr. Sharma, that the voices of marginalised religious communities are heard. Everyone in Pakistan, including Ahmadi Muslims, must be able to fully participate in Pakistan's upcoming elections, which has been described today by colleagues. We continue to urge, therefore, the government of Pakistan to uphold these constitutional principles of equality. The Minister for South Asia, Lord Ahmed, has written to Pakistan's caretaker Foreign Minister, Jalil Abbas Jalani, to urge the government to make sure that all Pakistan citizens can exercise their democratic rights. The Foreign Minister has replied assuring us of the government's commitment to the safety and security of all Pakistani citizens, regardless of their religious affiliation. And Prime Minister Kakar has said publicly on the 21st of August that the state and its laws will stand with the press groups, including Ahmadi Muslims, when they are under attack. And it's vital that these words are followed through with concrete actions. The UK government, therefore, will continue to work with the government of Pakistan on peaceful, credible and inclusive elections over the coming month. And it is crucial that our advocacy continues to be informed by the lived experience of the community we seek to protect. In May, the UK political councillor visited Rabwa, home to 95% of Pakistan's Ahmadi Muslims, to gain a deeper insight into the challenges faced by the community. And our High Commissioner continues to raise these issues in her calls with senior government officials, religious leaders and politicians. Now, in terms of programming, alongside this diplomatic advocacy, our programmes in Pakistan are focused on improving the lives of Pakistan's most vulnerable citizens. Avaz 2 programme brings together community leaders and minority representatives to promote tolerance in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Punjab provinces. And our hate speech and disinformation programme is working to protect marginalised religious communities and women against hate speech online, which was an important issue that was raised. And through the FCDO's Magna Carta and John Bunyan funds, we have supported research projects to improve our understanding of the challenges these communities face. But of course, we can't tackle such a complex issue alone. We work in concert with our like-minded diplomatic partners and continue to use our influence to spur the international community into action. And I would like to recognise, therefore, the work of the International Religious Freedom of Belief Alliance, very ably chaired by my honourable friend, the member for Congleton, which has been very active in raising the plight of Ahmadi Muslims. And in March 2022, the Alliance called on states to end the discrimination faced by the Ahmadi Muslim community and to defend their freedom of expression and freedom of religion or belief. And in last July, we hosted an international conference on freedom of religion or belief, bringing together 100 government delegations, 800 faith and belief leaders, human rights experts and NGOs to agree action to protect these freedoms. And during the conference, the Minister responsible for human rights, Lord Ahmed, announced a new funding to support those who defend religious freedom, including those who are targeted for their fearless activism. And as a result of this conference, 47 governments, international organisations and other entities pledged to take action in support of these fundamental rights. Furthermore, in January, we used our platform at the United Nations in Geneva to shine a light on this issue, and we continue to hold Pakistan to account, including using our statement at Pakistan's Universal Period Review adoption in July to publicly urge the Pakistani authorities to ensure the safety and religious freedom of Ahmadi Muslims. So I'd like to assure my honourable friend, the member for Carshalton and Wallington, and all colleagues who participated in this very important and powerful debate today, that the FCDO does work closely in partnership with the Home Office and across government on all of these important issues. Yeah, very briefly.
I'm very grateful. I just wonder if this list will be including something on visas for hate preachers coming to the UK and any consideration of looking into that issue.
Yes, I'm glad that she raised that. The honourable member for Glasgow raised that, and she's not in her place, but she did notify them that she was leaving. I'm pleased to report that we do consider this when visas are issued. Our immigration laws do allow us to screen and prevent those on that basis. So that is something. I'm glad she raised it. We have the capacity to stop people on that basis, and it's something that we will use if necessary. Now, of course, the UK has a proud history of providing protection for those who need it through our safe and legal routes, as I've mentioned, and we continue to welcome refugees and people in need through our global resettlement schemes, working in conjunction with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. So just let me conclude by reaffirming that the UK stands in solidarity with the persecuted Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan and all around the world, and we will continue our energetic diplomatic advocacy and our programmes, and we are very grateful for the contributions from all members on this important issue in this debate today.
Thank you, Minister. Elliot Colvin, 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. In the 30 seconds, I would just like to thank the Minister and the local Lord Ahmed for his reply. Thank colleagues for turning out in such good numbers today. Thank you to the community for appearing and supporting us today. And I do hope that the Minister will continue to do all he can so that we can truly achieve the Ahmadiyya motto of love for all, hatred for none.
The question is that this House has considered the treatment of Ahmadi Muslims in Pakistan. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned.